Many grievers believe that if they ignore their grief, it will disappear. However, it doesn't happen that way, because when we think that we are leaving our grief on the shelf, it follows us like a shadow. Has it happened to you? Maybe you have distracted yourself doing different things, maybe traveling, maybe not talking about what happened to you. Maybe you are just distracting yourself in going out too much because you do not want to face your grief. And then suddenly you feel numb, or you feel like so sad, so angry, and you do not understand why. This is a topic we will explore today. What happens when we do not face our grief? What can happen to us? Because it doesn't disappear, then what happens to it? Where does it go? At the end, I will share the 3 types of grief that can develop when we ignore our pain. Hello, I'm Ligia Huben, thanatologist and grief specialist. Thank you for being here with me again, because in this episode, we will be talking what happens to us when we conceal our grief, because it is very common. We live in a society that we are supposed to be okay all the time, that everything goes smooth, that everything is fine. However, there are times when we are not fine, we are not okay, and that's okay. The thing is that sometimes we do not know how to deal with our grief, and it's easier to put it aside and continue. And we continue like if nothing happened. However, the loss that we have experienced doesn't disappear. It stays inside. It is there. And something else happens. When we experience a new loss, that this, many clients, when this happens, many clients get really surprised that this may be happening. The previous loss that was not processed comes to the surface. Because when we are talking about loss, we are not only talking about the loss of a loved one. We go through different types of losses. That's why we want to be present to our losses. I remember in a seminar that we had here at the center, a lady was sharing with us that after experiencing the loss of her mom, she didn't want to be present to it because it was too painful for her. So she put it on, in the drawer and continued. And after years, I think it was the 8th anniversary, suddenly she felt like if it was the first one. And she was, Ligia, how come I feel this way after 8 years? I feel like if it was the first one, because she had never processed that grief. And that's why it is important to sit with our grief. We even talk about grieving mindfully. There is a book with that name, Grieving Mindfully, because we want to be present with our grief, because if it doesn't, then it can be represented physically. We may start developing headaches, insomnia, we cannot sleep, we may stop eating, or we may be eating a lot. And then we are like, how come? Because it's all that grief that we have inside. We may be snappy, with people. We may become irritable. All those things because what we have inside, it has to come out. But we do not understand the reason. We may be tired, extremely tired. What happens when we are working? Lack of concentration. Because we cannot pay attention to what we are doing, because inside we don't feel ourselves, and we do not know what is happening to us. So I suggest you take a pause. And you realize that this is happening to you. And then to make the decision to really pay attention and do something with your grief. Because if you do not do that, you may develop one of these different types of grief. One is the frozen grief. You stay frozen in what happened. Some people, even when they lose a loved one, they leave the bedroom, they leave it the same. After years passing, they leave the same, the things, like if the person is going to come back, they leave the clothing the same. And we're talking about years. So they stay frozen in the story. They stay frozen in the narrative. The other type of grief, which is the second type of grief, is complicated grief. Complicated. And people many times stop functioning. They cannot function, fully functioning, because they have stayed again. And sometimes we even call the frozen grief under that umbrella of complicated. It can be frozen. Now, what about the third one? Postponed. Postponed, and it comes years later. Like the story that I was telling you about this woman who have lost her mother. So it can be postponed. But the thing is that it does not disappear. So now that you pay attention to this, is it any type of grief that you are identifying with? How are you dealing with your grief? Are you avoiding it? Are you masking it? And when we talk about masking it, sometimes people do things that are not healthy. Overeating, drinking in excess, like alcohol, oversleeping, overworking. Those are ways to deal with grief in an unhealthy manner, because we are not facing it. If you're doing this, pay attention. Do you know what you can do? Take a piece of paper, and write there the things. What are you doing? Maybe you're doing some of the things I just mentioned. Do something else. Pay attention to all that, and then check. And what is helping you? If that is helping you, something that people do is go shopping, and they go shopping, but in excess. Acquiring things that they do not need. All these things are ways to deal with grief in a manner that is not helpful. Now, remember that when we talk about grief as the natural and unique response to loss, we want to remember what loss is, not only the loss of a loved one. Because for this exercise, I suggest, besides writing all those things that we are doing to deal with your grief, to write the losses that you may have experienced in the past. Because there are so many. Loss of health, divorce, breakup, loss of a homeland, loss of a pet. Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one. And sometimes loss of a pet, when it's from an adult, it is a disenfranchised grief that people sometimes don't give it the value it has. But for many people, their pet is their companion, their animal companion. Not too long ago, I was giving a talk at a conference of hypnotherapists, and I was talking about transforming healing into service. And there was a person, that he raised his hand, and he said, when I asked about if they have experienced a loss, recently, and he said, I lost my pet. I lost my dog. And he was saying that he was experiencing so much grief, that even more than what he had experienced, when he had lost a loved one. So these things are real. That's why we want to pay attention. Maybe you have had financial losses. That's a big one. That is a big one, So loss of a job, empty nest. Maybe you have had a situation with your child. Maybe you have, a very strong situation that you are not talking to one another. That can be a huge loss. So pay attention. It's your life. It's your life. And you deserve to be happy. And you may say, Ligia, how can I be happy if I'm grieving? Well, the thing is that if you're ignoring your grief, you're not allowing yourself to heal. Because when we go in and we do all the things that I'm sharing with you, as I have shared in another episode, the 5 things that you can do to heal your grief, and I mentioned them, like writing, meditating, even praying, having spiritual moments, exercise that can help us, talking about it. All those things help us. So take the time. It's your life. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to feel better than what you're feeling now. If you feel that you need extra help, professional help, do it. Do it, and then you can start processing, you can start validating all those emotions that you have inside. And then you can start healing from the inside out. I hope that this message has helped you in case you have been ignoring your grief. I hope that this has given some insight into what you can do to start feeling better. Until our next episode, from my heart to yours.